Today we're gonna be going the core for your EPA 608 review. This is gonna be practice test number 1. What does the ozone in the stratosphere above the earth consist of? Now, if this question is really simple, if you have gone to school or if you are going to school, you know that the stratosphere above the earth consists of oxygen atoms, and each oxygen atom has 3 molecules. It's not gonna be 2 molecules, it's not gonna be 4 molecules, and it's not gonna be 5. It's gonna be 3 molecules, and that will be the answer. Which of the following refrigerant has the lowest global warming potential? Now, the way I thought about this question while I was taking the test is basically to have a high global warming potential, it has to have a chlorine. The only refrigerant that does not contain a chlorine, it will be HFOs, which we all know R134A has chlorine. We all know R407C has chlorine, and we all know R410A has chlorine. So the only answer is R600A, and that refrigerant does not contain chlorine. Which of the following gases is used as a baseline measurement for global warming potential? Ammonia, that would not be it. CFC12, that would not be it. That's actually a refrigerant, so you never, that's not a baseline measurement for global warming potential. And propane is basically ammonia. So if you have two answers that are basically the same, none of them are the answers. So the answer for this one and the baseline measurement, it will be carbon dioxide. Which type of refrigerant typically has the lowest global warming potential? CFC, that would not be it. That has chlorine, and we basically went over this already. If it has chlorine, it has a high global warming potential. HFC, it wouldn't be it either. They are all equal. No, the answer in here will be HFOs. I did say before that HFOs does not contain chlorine, so that will be the answer that has the lowest global warming potential. That will be the answer for number 3. What is the state of refrigerant entering the compressor of a refrigeration system? Now, entering the compressor, you never want liquid entering the compressor. So high pressure liquid and low pressure liquid is off. So you only have high pressure vapor and low pressure vapor. So entering the compressor, you always want low pressure vapor. So that will be the answer. B will be the answer for number 4. Why are HFO refrigerants less flammable than hydrocarbon refrigerants? So this answer is simple. We already went the HFOs do not contain chlorine. Is basically going down the line. So HFOs have a hydrogen and fluorine, and you see fluorine as one of the answers, so that will be the answer for number 5. What does section 608 certification allow technicians to do? So you are basically studying for your EPA, so you should know what this is for. But let's go over the answers. So import R22 from overseas, that is, no, that's completely off. Service motor vehicles air conditioner, no, that is a different certification. This does not cover motor vehicles. perform any type of work on any type of HVAC equipment. So for some higher level HVAC equipment, they will require you to have other stuff. So the only answer for this one will be purchase or handle refrigerants. Type of refrigerant has the highest ODP, stands for ozone depletion potential. HCFCs, HFCs, CFCs, and HFOs. So the way I teach this in class is the one that doesn't have an H but has two C's. So that basically means chlorine, fluorine, and carbon. The one that has a hydrogen, chlorine, fluorine, and carbon, it could be a really good answer too, but the hydrogen kind of like slows down the chlorine. So the answer for this one will be CFCs, chlorine, fluorine, and carbon. Which of the following refrigerant contains chlorine? R22, R134A, R410A, or R1234YF. So that one, D is completely off because it does not contain chlorine and is an HFO. So the one that will be the answer for this one will be R22, which has a lot of chlorine. HFC refrigerant contains which of the following? So you basically go down the line. So it's asking you about HFCs. So is hydrogen, fluorine, and carbon. So the answer for this one will be obvious. It will be D, hydrogen, fluorine, and carbon. What is being done in the US to stop damage to the stratospheric ozone layer? So this answer is very simple. Well, it might be very simple for me because I already passed it, but basically how you gotta think about it, you are dealing a lot with refrigerants. That is why the EPA is there. So basically, the answer for this one will be phasing out the use of CFCs and HFCs. How should disposable of a cylinder of CFC, HCFCs, and HFC be discarded? A. Bleed any remaining refrigerant. Just reading that, you never want to let any refrigerant out, you never want to bleed it out. So no, that is completely off. That would not be the answer. Use the cylinder as a recovery tank. No, it's already contaminated, so you don't want to do that. Fill cylinder at an approved facility and reuse. You don't want to do that either. What you want to do is recover any remaining refrigerant, render the cylinder useless, and recycle the metal. In addition to fines and being required to appear in court, what penalties can be imposed on service technicians who violate the Clean Air Act? They may be required to take an online test. No. They may be required to take mandatory training. No. They may have equipment confiscated. No, that does not make sense. The only answer that makes sense is that they may lose their certification. For an appliance that uses CFC, HCFCs, and HFC refrigerant, which of the following violates the prohibition on venting? So A, as accidental release. Just by reading that, it says accidental, so it is like you couldn't control it. It's accidental, so that would not be it. Refrigerant emitted when connecting or disconnecting low loss to charge or service a system. That would not be it. Low loss is there for a reason, and when you connect hoses, when you connect or disconnect hoses, you might let out a little bit that is called the de minimis. For this one will be a refrigerant emitted when cutting a line without properly evacuating the system. That is your fault because you did not evacuate the system properly. So for this question, without reading the whole question, I have a tip. So just by reading chemical analysis on the test, whenever you read chemical analysis or the process and it has a chemical analysis at the end, it is always going to be reclaiming. And that's a way of knowing something without reading the whole question, having to read the whole question to find out the right answer. And it says chemical analysis is always going to be reclaiming. So for this one, another way to look at this one without reading the answer, glycol oil, ester oil, and castor oil are all the same thing. So for this one, you're not gonna have either one of those be the answer because they're all the same. So the only one that is the answer in here is A. Should refrigerant blends be charged? Now, an example of a refrigerant blend is R410A, and you always wanna charge it as a liquid phase. So on this one is asking about your gauges. So I will put a picture up here of the gauges, but this one is asking about the low side, and I will tell you it is not gonna be PSIA. So A and D are not gonna be the answer. Torns and microns, that will not be the answer either. The answer for this will be PSIG and inches of mercury. So another tip for this question will be, it's asking you a process again, and about refrigerant, of course, but whenever this a process and is cleaning refrigerant or anything that has to do with cleaning, so you just read the word cleaning when it's asking you about a process, and the answer is always going to be recycle. So without reading the whole question, you see the word cleaning, you know the answer will be recycle. Which factor does not affect the speed of recovery? Now for this one, standing vacuum test, now you will get a different readings letting you know that you have a leak but it will not be the most effective method. Audible sound, that will not be it because sometimes you don't really hear anything or it's in a space that you can't really hear. A helio torch, no, that would not be it. That was used back then, but and like you can detect leaks, but that's not the most effective method. The most effective method is electronic or ultrasonic tester. So in this one, you found different type of refrigerant in a system that is not meant for the refrigerant. So what should you do? Bend the refrigerant? No, you never want to do that. That is against EPA. You don't want to do that at all. What you want to do is you want to recover the refrigerant but in separate tanks so you don't have a mixture of refrigerants, and that will make the refrigerant contaminated. So you want to recover the refrigerant but in separate tanks. Which factor does not affect the speed of recovery? The size of the equipment being evacuated, that will affect it because the bigger the equipment that's being evacuated, the longer it will take, and the more refrigerant it has, the longer it will take. Ambient temperature, yes, the temperature will affect it depending on if the temperature goes up, the pressure is also going to go up. If the pressure goes down, the pressure goes down. The amount of moisture in the system. That is the number one thing. If you have moisture in the system, the speed is gonna be affected tremendously. The brand of micron gauge used, no, that will not affect it because it's a brand. You're gonna have a good micron gauge anyways, so the brand does not affect it. So that's the answer. So this answer will be simple. Safety precautions. You basically, a tip in here is if it says safety, that's a precaution, so that won't be the answer because it says except. So wear safety glasses, of course. Wear protective goggles, protective gloves, of course. Follow all safety precautions, has the word safety, of course. The only one that shouldn't be done, and the ones that's not the answer, the one that is the answer, remain at least 5 feet away from the operating equipment. That will be the answer for number 23. Refrigerant cylinders should be all of the following except be free of rust and damage. They do need to be free of rust and damage. Be secure. They do need to be secure. Be labeled. They also need to be labeled. Filled to 95% of its capacity. No, the capacity is 80%, so that will be the answer because it says except. All the other ones are that's what you should do. That one does the answer because it says except. It will be filled to 95% of capacity. So question number 25. So on this question, it is really simple. You are talking about a DOT. So the DOT requires you to attach DOT classification tags. They don't really care about OSHA. OSHA cares about OSHA. Shipped by EPA carrier. No. Do all the above? Not really, because not all of them will make sense. The only one that makes sense is attached DOT classification tags. The DOT cares about that, so you should do it. We have covered the core for practice test number 1, and next week we're gonna cover type 1 for practice test number 1. Peace. We are back, guys, and today we are gonna be doing practice test number 1, but today we're gonna start with type 1. What is typically used on small appliances? The answer for number 1, and the only one that makes sense, is a straight piece of tubing that is entered using a piercing service. Now for this question is basically the definition of small appliances. And again, whenever you're taking the test, remember what section you're on. You're on type 1, so it's basically asking you the definition of type 1 on this question. And the definition is appliances containing 5 pounds or less of a refrigerant that have been hermetically sealed and charged at the factory. Now, for this question, it is very simple. Again, focus on what section you're doing. You're doing type 1. So, the answer for this one is very simple. The one that has type 1. So, type 1 technicians or universal technicians. That would be the answer for number 3. Question number 4. You are required to recover 80% of the refrigerant. It doesn't matter if you're using a system dependent or self-contained recovery device. The answer for this one is either of them. So the answer will be either a system dependent or a self-contained recovery device. Number 5, which of the following does not meet the criteria for type 1 certification? This one is also very easy. Or it might be easy because I already took the test, but the answer for this one is basically not in the book. It doesn't cover it. 608 doesn't cover it. It's a different certification, and it will be A. Motor vehicles, that doesn't cover it, so that's a different certification. I believe that is 609 certification. So that A will be the answer for number. Now for number 6, the only answer that really makes sense is in here will be D, a domestic refrigerator. So the maximum allowable charge to use a system-dependent recovery device would not be 5 pounds, it would not be 10 pounds, and it would not be 50 pounds. The answer will be 15 pounds. Now for this question, basically the definition of type 1 will tell you the answer. So the answer for this question, it will be 5 pounds, because a type 1 appliance is a maximum of 5 pounds or less of refrigerant that is factory charged and hermetically sealed. So 5 pounds will be the answer for number 8. For this question, I want you guys to remember when there is an inoperative compressor, it will be 80%, and 4-inch vacuum. When the compressor is operating, so an operative compressor is 90%, and 4-inch vacuum. So non-operating 80%, operating 90%, and 4-inch vacuum for both. So looking at D and C, they say 75% of refrigerant and 95% of refrigerant. So that is completely off. Those are not the answer. And B, it says 80% of refrigerant, but the compressor is operating. Remember, when the compressor is operating, it's 90%. So B will not be the answer either. The answer for this one will be A. Now for this one, there is 3 refrigerants that a refrigerator could be factory charged with, and the only one that won't be, so it will be the answer because it does say except in this question. So R404A will be the answer. Now this question is asking you, why should you let the cylinder stabilize to room temperature? And the answer for this one is basic. So you need to let it stabilize to room temperature, because the comparison to the pressure temperature chart will only be accurate if the pressure and temperature are stabilized. So how do you get them stabilized? They are stable. So how do you get them to be stable? You let the cylinder stabilize going into another room, so adapting to the room temperature. This one is simple. If you have both sides connected at the same time, you are gonna improve the speed of recovery. So the answer is A. You are recovering a refrigerant. So what do you want to know? The first thing that you want to know, you don't really care about anything else, is the type of refrigerant that you are recovering. How do you do that? You look at the nameplate. The nameplate will tell you exactly what type of refrigerant you are recovering, and you want to know the type of refrigerant you are recovering so you don't mix refrigerants. So the answer would be B. Know the type of refrigerant that you're recovering, so you can prevent contamination. So what should should a technician do if they suspect the refrigerant to be contaminated? This is simple. There is a facility for that, and what you want to do, turn the refrigerant in for reclamation. That will be the answer for this question. So a tip for this question, to do it faster, once you see the word drop in, and I tell all of my students this, once you see the word drop in substitute, there is no such thing as a drop in substitute. So that's the answer right there. There is no such thing as a drop in substitute. If a reclamation facility receives a tank of mixed refrigerant, the two things that they may do is, one, they may refuse to take the refrigerant in, and two, they may charge you extra. So that will be the answer for number 16. A will be the answer for number 16. A passive system dependent recovery process for small appliance is self-dependent, so no, it does not use a pump. Must use a pressure release valve when recovering refrigerant. Can only be performed on a system with an operating compressor. No, none of those make sense. The only one that makes sense in this one, a system-dependent recovery process always recovers it in a non-pressurized container. So the answer for this one would be C. This question is asking you how many valves, and it's pretty simple. It will be 2 valves, one on the high side and one on the low side of the system. Operative compressor in a refrigerator. What should you do? It is helpful to heat and strike the compressor with a rubber mallet. This one is very simple. If you have any excess fittings or anything like that, you always wanna leak test it before processing with the recovery. So the answer for this one will be A. And R410A is recovered from an appliance. It should. Now, answer A and B both say can be mixed. No, you never want to mix refrigerant. You never want to do that, so those are not the answer. Answer C needs not to be recovered. Yes, the refrigerant does need to be recovered. So the only answer for this one will be D. Should be recovered into a recovery vessel that is clearly marked, so the mixing refrigerant does not occur. For this question is asking you about safety. So safety, you always want to wear a multi-line gloves and safety glasses when recovering when connecting or disconnecting hoses. Question number 3, and something helpful for question number 3, and something I found for taking this test many times, is whenever there is the word regulator in the answers, that will be the answer. However, especially on this question, it's asking you what a nitrogen tank should be equipped with, and it will be a regulator. A very large refrigerant leak can cause suffocation because it is a very large refrigerant leak, so that's why it causes suffocation. But if you have a small refrigerant leaks, you're always basically gonna let out a little of refrigerant when you're connecting and disconnecting hoses. But why does it cause a suffocation when there's a very large refrigerant leak? It is because a refrigerant is heavier than air and displace oxygen. Now, question number 25, the last question. This question is very, very simple, and there's a trick I came up with that I say if you can't pronounce it, then it's probably not the answer. And it does work, that's why I say it. I'm not gonna share something with you guys if it doesn't work. So if you can't pronounce it, it's not the answer. So the only one that you can pronounce is hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid. So that will be the answer for number 25. Next video, we're doing type 2 4 practice test number 1. Today we're gonna be doing type 2 4 practice test number 1. So let's get started. When first inspecting a hermetic system known to be leaking, you should look for frost on the tubing. No, that's not the first thing you should look for. Puddles of refrigerant, you're never gonna have like puddles of refrigerant. Particles of the filter dryer core. No. What you're gonna be looking for is trace of oil. The suction service valve, no. The one or both of the gang valves, no. And head gaskets and discharge valve, no. The answer for this one will be the rotating shaft seal. Now, number 3, for any question like this that is asking you about the leak rates, I have gone over this multiple times. So in this one, I put the commercial in all capital letters just because when it's asking you about a leak rate, look for either commercial, industrial, or comfort cooling. In this case, commercial, and commercial is always gonna be 20% leak rate. Comfort cooling is gonna be 10% leak rate, and industrial is gonna be 30% leak rate. So for this question, the answer will be B, 20% leak rate. So for number 4, you repaired a leak of a supermarket with 300 pounds of or a R22. So when must a follow-up leak verification test be conducted? Now for this question, you always want to be within 10 days. So for this question, answer A, immediate. You never want to do anything immediate, especially on like the whole refrigeration cycle. You never want to do anything immediate. Now, conduct a follow-up verification. No, because the verification failed and you need to repair the leak before you do that. Report the amount of refrigerant. No, you don't need to report the amount of refrigerant. The right answer for this one will be B. Conduct additional repair within the next 30-day window. So when recovery is first started, at what phase do you want to recover the refrigerant to save time? So you always want to recover refrigerant as a liquid phase, and that would save you time. So for this question, where must you connect the hose in order to recover liquid refrigerant? It's kind of simple. If you want to recover liquid refrigerant, you should connect the hose in the liquid line, not the vapor line. It's kind of obvious. Recovering refrigerant in the vapor phase will of course minimize the loss of oil. So B is the answer for number 8. So for this question, you already recovered the liquid refrigerant. So after recovering the liquid, you still have refrigerant in it. It's just not liquid, it's vapor refrigerant. So of course you wanna remove the refrigerant by the recovery system. How can you speed up the removal of refrigerant charge from a system? Using a smaller recovery vessel. No, that wouldn't make sense. Using a 2-stage vacuum pump. That would not make sense either. heating the recovery cylinder to raise its pressure. No, you don't want to raise the pressure, you want to lower it. So the right answer will be cooling the recovery cylinder to lower its pressure. So B will be the answer for number 10. If a hermetic compressor overheats when drawing deep vacuum, it is because the motor relies on the flow of refrigerant through the compressor for cooling. So for this answer is simple. You already have a refrigerant in the recovery equipment. So of course there's all the answers say change. You do want to change filters or any of that, but you first want to remove the R22. So the only one that says that is D. So yes, if you have a refrigerant in a recovery equipment already, you wanna remove the refrigerant so you will be able to recover the other refrigerant. In this case, the R410A. So for this question, keep in mind it says false. So it must be tested by EPA approved laboratory. Yes, it does need to be tested by EPA approved laboratory. Equipment designed to recover flammable refrigerant must meet specific UL safety standards. Yes. It must be equipped with low loss fittings. Yes, you do need to have low loss fittings. The answer for this one will be purchase of such equipment must be reported to the EPA. You don't need to report it to the EPA, and that will be the answer because it does say false. The other ones do make sense. That's the only one that doesn't. So that's the answer. Now for this question, you want to evacuate the isolated section of the system, and if the pressure does not rise after a few minutes, you want to remove the compressor. So for this question, like I said before, you never want to do anything immediately. So every answer in here, even though it doesn't say immediate, it's like that's what you're doing something immediate. So no, you always wanna wait. So the only answer for this one is B, and the one that does say wait is B. So that's the answer. So this is this question only comes up in all the 5 parts that I took. It only comes up one time, and I found a trick for this one. Of course, there's a way of finding the right answer. Going to the book, it actually tells you, but I found a trick for this one just to make it faster for you guys. And is when it says R10A, and then you go to the answer, and the answer has. So when it says R10A, you go to the answer, and there is one that says 10 inches of HG vacuum, and that is always the answer. So what I did, I mashed up the 10 with the 10 from the question with the 10 with the answer, and I tried it, and I did it continuously, and it worked. So that's why I'm sharing it with you guys. The other way is going to the book and finding out the right answers with the right HG vacuum and all that, depending on the pounds and the refrigerant. But just to do it fast, R10 with the 10 inches of HG vacuum. So for this question, the answer will be leak and the appliance make recovery to prescribed level unattainable. That is the only answer, and that's the only one that makes sense. Now this one is asking you about major repair. So major is like, you gotta know the major components, and it is evaporator, compressor, condenser, and metering device. The metering device and compressor change pressure and temperature, and then the evaporator absorbs heat and the condenser rejects heat. But for this one, The answer would be A. The answer will be a replacement of the evaporator coil, because the filter dryer is not a major component. The Schrader valve core is not a major component either, and the condenser fan motor is not a major part. The condenser is, but the condenser fan motor is not a major component. So the answer will be a replacement of the evaporator coil. When is it against EPA regulation to use system-dependent recovery equipment? So system-dependent recovery equipment, you will know what is against EPA regulation by looking up the definition, and the definition is containing 15 pounds or less. And this one says 15 pounds or more of refrigerant. So the answer will be C. When the appliance containing over 15 pounds of refrigerant. Now for this one, I will put a picture up here of the refrigeration system, but basically it's asking you what is the state of refrigerant leaving the receiver of a refrigeration system, and the state of refrigerant leaving the receiver of a refrigeration system will be a high pressure liquid. On this one, you always want to charge liquid. You always want to charge refrigerant into a system and through the liquid. So this one is pretty simple. The only one that says liquid through the actual liquid line, that's a way of looking at it without having to think too much. Liquid through the liquid line. That will be the answer. So the answer is D. So how would you remove moisture from a refrigeration system? Again, a component that is meant to remove moisture from a refrigeration system is your filter dryer. So this question is very simple. Use a filter dryer. D. So not required. We all know for R 134A it is required. For 404A is also required, and R10A is kind of the most used refrigerant. So yeah, it is required. So the only answer for this one is R17. When could a reciprocating compressor be damaged if energized? When the suction service valve is open? No. When the discharge service valve is open? No. When the demand for cooling is at a steady state? No. The answer will be when the discharge service valve is closed. So for this one, if you are in the field or you have basically read the book, you know that every time you use a nitrogen tank to pressurize a system, or you just use a nitrogen tank, you know it will need to be equipped with a pressure regulator. So the answer for this one will be requires a pressure regulator. That will be the answer for 25. And next video we are doing type 3, and we are finishing with practice test number 1, and then we're gonna start practice test number 2. Peace. So today we are doing practice test number 1, type 3, the last part for this practice test, and then we're gonna start with practice test number 2. So first question, a hydrostatic tube test kit will, remember, for most of the Depending on the section you're doing, you gotta remember what section you're doing. You're doing type 3, mainly chillers. So this is gonna have basic like water. Like for leaks, is gonna have like water. So determine if a tube leaks. Blow all water out of the tube. No. Remove water from the machine. No. Ban refrigerant to atmospheric pressure. No, you never want to ban refrigerant. So like I was saying, you never want to ban any refrigerant. You never want to do that. Remove water from the machines. No. Blow all water out of the tube. No. A hydrostatic tube test kit will determine if a tube leaks. So like I said, mainly chillers, they have tubes. So a hydrostatic, which is basically hydro water, a test kit will determine if the tube leaks. Question number 2. When leak testing a low pressure centrifugal with nitrogen, what is the maximum test pressure? Now, the maximum test pressure would always be 10 psig. It will not be 0 psig, it will not be 25, it will not be 50, it will be 10 psig. Question number 3. Charged low pressure refrigeration machines may be most effectively leak checked by adding dry nitrogen to increase pressure. No, you don't want to increase the pressure. Adding refrigerant, you never want to add refrigerant into a system or into a machine. Adding heat will circulate hot water or heating blankets. Operating the purge unit to see how much air comes out. No. The answer will be adding heat with circulated hot water or heating blankets. That will be the answer. Again, type 3 low pressures, mainly chillers. So you wanna adding heat with circulated hot water or heating blankets. Number 4. What should be done to reduce refrigerant loss from the purge unit in a R123 chiller? A leak test and repair the chiller. Seal the purge unit discharge line. Pipe purge unit back into the low side. Pipe purge unit back into recovery unit. None of that really makes sense. The answer for this one will be leak test and repair the chiller. That will be the answer for number 4. Number 5. Starting in 2019, EPA regulations required that all chillers contain more than 50 pounds of ozone depleting refrigerant that are used for comfort cooling to repaired when the leak exceeds. Now, whenever you have a question like this asking you about leak rates, I have mentioned it before. Comfort cooling is always going to be 10%. Industrial is going to be 30%, and commercial is going to be 20%. So for this one, it will be B, 10% of the charge per year. That will be the leak rate for comfort cooling. You see it right here, comfort cooling. What is the best method to determine a chiller's normal charge for leak rate circulation? Determined from the maximum power consumption? No. Determined from the compressor horsepower? No. Determined from the dimension of the chiller barrels? No. Use the chart stated on the equipment's nameplate? Yes. So whenever you're working on a system, it doesn't matter if it's chiller, whatever it is, the refrigerant charge is always going to be on the nameplate. And the nameplate, if it's outside, sometimes just because of the rain and everything, it might be worn off, so you might not be able to see it. But inside, it should also have it in the air handler. So yeah, in the nameplate, there will always be the charge. So number 7. Who is responsible for keeping records of all leaks, inspections, and any completed leak repair verification test? Now this is kind of simple and it's kind of obvious too. Of course, you would want, let me read the questions first, but the answer is gonna be simple, common sense. So the original installing technicians, employers, only the technician that has actually performed each inspection or verification, the owner and or operator of the equipment, the EPA leak rate assessment division. That doesn't make sense at all. So the answer for this one is, of course, the owner and or operator of the equipment. So if you work on the equipment, you're gonna keep records, and the owner might also keep records. So the owner and or operator of the equipment. Number 8. A typical setting for high pressure cut-out control on a recovery unit and used for evacuating from a low pressure chiller. Again, another tip for this one. So cut-out, whenever it says cut-out control on a recovery unit, so cutout is always 10 psig. So when it says cutout control, it's 10 psig. So it won't be 1 psig, it won't be 5 psig, it won't be 15 psig, it will be 10 psig. So number 9. Refrigerant removal from a low pressure system starts with. So this one is common sense again. It doesn't matter what equipment you're working on. Every removal of refrigerant has to start with liquid. So the answer for this one, of course, it will be liquid removal. Not vapor removal, not vapor and liquid removal, not oil separation, it will be liquid removal. Number 10. What must be done after recovering the liquid refrigerant from a low pressure chiller? So this is also a common sense question. So basically you have two types of, not types, but two, I guess you can say types. Two types of refrigerant. You have vapor refrigerant and you have liquid refrigerant. So of course, in this one, if you remove the liquid refrigerant, you still have vapor refrigerant in it. So it's asking you, what should you do after you recover all the liquid refrigerant? And of course, it's gonna be recover the vapor refrigerant. Pressurize the system with nitrogen. No, that's too leak check. Separate the oil from the system. No. Soviet flush the entire system. No. It will be recover the vapor refrigerant. That makes sense because you recover the liquid refrigerant, you still have vapor refrigerant. You gotta recover the vapor refrigerant. So number 11, approximately how much refrigerant vapor is left in an average 350 ton R123 chiller at 0 psi once all the R123 liquid has been removed? Again, the liquid is like 80% of what's in it, so you can do the math, but I will tell you right here, it's not trace amount. It's not 15 pounds, it's not 75 pounds, it's 100 pounds. So 350 ton minus the liquid refrigerant, it will be 100 pounds left of vapor refrigerant. So that will be the answer for number 11. Number 12, when evacuating a system that use severely oversized vacuum pump could cause trapped oil to freeze, cause trapped refrigerant to freeze, cause trapped water to freeze, cause the valve to freeze. So in questions like this, whenever it has whenever it's asking you like what would happen in like oversized, in this case oversized vacuum pump or what, or anything like that, and it's basically on low pressure, which is your type 3, it will only be in questions of type 3. It will always be trap water to freeze or trap liquid to freeze if you don't have a water, which is basically the same thing, but the answer is always going to be trap water to freeze. Refrigerant to freeze, no. Trapped oil to freeze, no. Cause the valve to freeze, no. It will be trapped water to freeze. That's why you have water circulating, so the water will not freeze. Next question. After system servicing and charging, why is refrigerant vapor reintroduced to the chiller before refrigerant liquid? So this one, I basically just said this. So it will be liquid charged into a deep vacuum will evaporate and may lower the temperature, freezing water in the heat exchanger tube bundle. Again, so the vapor is reintroduced so it doesn't freeze. So that is the answer for number 13. Number 14. What should you do after reaching the required recovery vacuum on a low pressure appliances? Now, on questions like this, when it's asking you what should you do, a tip is you never want to do anything immediately. You always want to wait. Right here, it does say on answer B, wait for at least a few minutes to see if the system pressure rises before charging. You never wanna do anything immediate, so A is off. Break the vacuum, that's doing something immediate, and pressurize is also doing something immediate. You always wanna wait a few minutes for anything that you're basically doing. For pressures to regulate, for anything to get the right reading, you gotta wait. So number 15, which of the following actions would always be considered major under EPA regulation. So major, again, you gotta think of the four major components, which are evaporator, condenser, metering device, and compressor. The compressor and metering device are the ones that change the lowers and the ones that lowers pressure and temperature, and the evaporator absorbs the heat, and the condenser rejects the heat. That's why when you put your hand over the condenser outside your house, you feel hot air because it's rejecting the heat, it's pushing it out. So the answer for this one, replacement of an evaporator coil. It wouldn't be replacement of a filter dryer because that is not a major component. Of a replacement of a switch is not a major component either, and replacement of the purge unit is not a major component. It will be replacement of the evaporator coil. Number 16. When should an appliance not be evacuated all the way to prescribed level? A tip for this one, it says prescribed, so in the answer it says prescribed too. So the only one that says that is when leak and the appliance makes evacuation to the prescribed level unattainable. So that will be the answer, and that's a trick that I found out from doing this continuously. So that's why I'm sharing it with you guys. I wouldn't share something that doesn't really work. Number 17. Which of the following statement is true of recycling and recovering equipment? It must be tested by ASHRAE approved third party. It must be equipped with low loss valves and flare fittings. It must be able to handle more than one refrigerant. It must be labeled and certified to meet EPA regulation. So let's read the question again. Which of the following statement is true of recycling and recovering equipment? So the answer for this one is it must be labeled. We gotta have a label as certified to meet EPA requirements. So that's what has to be done. So it must be labeled and it must be certified to meet EPA requirements. So number 18, which of the following methods can be used to pressurize an or 1233 CD system for the purpose of opening the system for a non-major repair? Non-major repair, you gotta read it. You gotta read that word. So adding nitrogen to the system, warming the liquid refrigerant in the system, adding compressed air to. You never wanna add compressed air to a system. It would basically fucking explode. So you never wanna add a compressed air to a system. Adding carbon dioxide to the system's condenser and evaporator. You never want to do that either. So warming the liquid refrigerant in the system, that will be the answer. Number 19. How long must a technician evacuating refrigerant from an appliance with a full charge of more than 5 pounds and 5 pounds or less than 50 pounds that are being disposed of, or keep records of the event? So the answer for this one, for number 19, that it will not be 1 year, it will not be 5 years, it will not be 3 years. You gotta keep record for a total of 3 years. Number 20. What is the primary purpose of a press unit in a low pressure chiller. So the press unit does one thing. It doesn't really matter like what it does in a chiller or a regular condenser. It's still the same thing. It removes refrigerant from the system. No, the press unit does not remove refrigerant from the system. It condenses air out of the system, condense water out of the system. No. Remove non-condensable from the system. Yes. Remove non-condensable from the system. That is what the press unit is meant to do. Number 21. Where does the press unit on a centrifugal system take its suction? Top of the condenser, compressor oil, sump, top of the evaporator, suction elbow. So we know where the press unit is located, and if you don't, I'll put a picture up here of the whole, like where it has the press unit, where it's meant to be and all that. But the press unit is in the top of the condenser. R123 at 1.7 psi will boil at approximately. So again, in the book, you can go in the book and find out like the right answer and everything, and I do have the book around here somewhere, but just so you'll know the answer, the answer will be 82 Fahrenheit, not 90, not 78, and not 74. Now I could go in the book and show you how to find out the answer. I don't know where my book is at right now, where I put it. That is the answer, and so you'll know the answer already. So yeah. Where does refrigerant go after it leaves the press unit on a low pressure centrifugal system? It goes to the evaporator, the condenser, the compressor, and intercooler, the recovery service vessel. For 23, the answer will be the press unit. Again, is a in the refrigeration system. I'll put it up here again. Is it goes from the press unit, it goes to the evaporator. So ASHRAE Standard 15 2013 requires the use of a room sensor and alarms to detect a high level of ozone. No, doesn't make sense. A refrigerant contamination. No. Excessive oxygen levels. No. So excessive oxygen level, that will be stupid, because every room is gonna have oxygen. You need oxygen. So in here, the EPA is all about refrigerant, right? So it's kind of simple. Refrigerant leaks. An alarm sensor is there for refrigerant leaks. ASHRAE Standard 2013 requires the use of room sensor and alarm to detect A1 refrigerants, B2 refrigerants, A2 refrigerants, or all refrigerant safety groups. Again, we're talking about refrigerants, and this is basically gonna be for all refrigerants. So the right answer for this one will be all refrigerant safety groups. So that will be for type 3. Next video, we're gonna start on the core for practice test number 2. Peace.